Is LinkedIn this boring, stuffy place where people just spam you all the time? Is Twitter this place where people just dump their opinions and are nasty to each other all the time? Here are some of the things that I love and hate about both LinkedIn and Twitter.
Which one sucks and which one doesn't suck? Let's see after this video. I was never really into social media in the first place. I had a Facebook account mostly just to share pictures with family and friends, and that was it. In fact, when Twitter came out, like in 2007, I was in a monastery. You don't hear about that kind of thing in monasteries. One time I quoted something from Star Wars, and I got a strange look from one of the sisters. I said, "Oh, it's from Star Wars." And she looked at me, "What's Star Wars?" How is this possible? But when I started studying web development, I knew eventually I would want to get a job. I also heard about someone who had graduated boot camp and had decided to challenge herself to make 30 apps in 30 days. And this was when I just started learning. Her name was Shantae Austin, and I heard people talking about her saying, "Man, she is killing it on LinkedIn, whoa." I remember hearing them talking about her and thinking, I want that to be me someday. I want someone to say, "I'm killing it on LinkedIn." That was fun. Please subscribe before I die. 1, 2, 3. Oh, that was farther than I thought. So I became very active on LinkedIn. I started posting what I was learning. I started posting demos of my projects I was making, and the response was really good. In fact, I still remember this moment. The first time this happened, I went to a meetup and someone approached me and said, "Didn't I see you on LinkedIn?" I said, "Oh yeah, I've been posting on LinkedIn." And this happened more and more. I was a LinkedIn top voice for 2019 for web development. Like, I was famous. But I didn't have a job, so who cares? And all the people who were following me said, why haven't you got a job yet?" "Oh, great question. I'd like to know that too." I started to realize that the people who were following me were all in the same situation as I was. There were all these people trying to get a job. That was not my target audience. I wanted to get in front of the decision makers, the hiring managers, startup founders, not other beginners like me. Another strong presence on LinkedIn is recruiters. And they didn't care about me. I talked to a few recruiters just through a recommendation from someone else, and they all thought I had been to a boot camp. I hadn't been to a boot camp. Nothing. I was just this person who had been teaching myself at home. This car has problems. So LinkedIn has a bunch of people looking for jobs and a bunch of recruiters. But there's another presence on LinkedIn that actually turned out very well for me, and that is founders and entrepreneurs. About a year after I started learning, I got into React Native, and I posted that I was learning React Native. Very soon after that, an entrepreneur reached out to me and asked if I was willing to build a React Native app for him. I was ecstatic because this is the first time I had gotten paid for programming. I was getting paid, guys. Yes! And another thing is, right after that, another entrepreneur reached out to me for another React Native app. So I was on my way to be a freelancer through LinkedIn. Woo-hoo-hoo-hoo! Yes! So at one point I was at a meetup with some of my friends, and they said, "Why aren't you on Twitter? You would do great on Twitter." Twitter had never really appealed to me. I didn't get Twitter, like what was its purpose? If I went on there, what would I even say? But they told me stories. That's how this person got their job, is through a connection on Twitter, or this person didn't even have to interview for a job. That was pretty convincing. Like, that sounded pretty nice. So I got on Twitter. In the jungle, the mighty jungle. One thing I noticed right away about Twitter is that it's a lot harder to get connections. They're not called connections, they're called followers. In LinkedIn, you can just send out a bunch of connection requests, and I did that shamelessly. But you can't do that in Twitter. You can't send follow requests. People just follow you of their own free will if they think you're worth seeing in their feed. And that's one great thing about Twitter, is that you really can control your feed a lot more. You don't have that kind of control on LinkedIn as much. How do I look? Something that I loved about LinkedIn was, as a beginner who was trying to learn, there was such a supportive community of developers. They were encouraging me, giving me advice, giving me pointers. It was so amazing. It helped fight imposter syndrome. It helped me keep going and to learn more. So that helped me so much on LinkedIn. Now that I've been on Twitter for a while, I see the same thing happening. So which one is better for getting a job? In my case, I kind of struck out on LinkedIn. What happened on Twitter was I posted a demo video of my React Native app, and literally a week later, someone reached out to me with a job opportunity. On LinkedIn, I had about 10,000 followers after a year of being on LinkedIn, and that's when I got my freelance opportunities. On Twitter, I was on there for about 3 months and had 400 followers, only 400, when I got a job. Score! So here are the things that I love and hate about LinkedIn and Twitter. LinkedIn, it's much easier to start building a following and connect to people. Twitter is really hard. How about quality feed? Like I said before, Twitter, you can control your feed a lot more. You can follow who you want to follow, unfollow others, or block people. LinkedIn, I'm not quite sure how the algorithm works. So what about learning? I would say that LinkedIn wins on learning because the posts and the comments can be longer. I learned so much through people's long comments on my posts, people volunteering their information. On Twitter, you get a character limit, right? What about encouragement? They're pretty tied. I got a lot of encouragement and support in LinkedIn, and there's a lot of encouragement and support in Twitter. So now, how about getting a job? I found that the best networking happens in an informal environment among peers. If you want to network, you don't go to a formal hiring party where everyone is wearing suits and handing out cards. You go to a cocktail party where people are standing around exchanging witty remarks. And that's basically what Twitter ends up being. It's like the cocktail party that never ends. So far, they're tied. And that's great. They're both amazing platforms, depending on what your needs are. But I'm going to throw in a little tiebreaker here, based on my personal needs. I need GIFs. They're so expressive. If a picture's worth 1,000 words, a GIF's worth 1,000,000. And LinkedIn does not support GIFs. So sad. So all that aside, I have learned so much on both platforms. I've made friends on both, and I've made money on both. The benefits of having a network on either LinkedIn or Twitter or both are immeasurable. Twitter, LinkedIn, go! Twitter wins!